Hi, Michelle Glass here. Welcome back to our final episode in our discussion of organic macromolecules for Biology 1010. This is our Chapter 3, Lecture 3.5, and for Human Anatomy and Physiology, this is actually the last episode of our Chapter 2 material, so Lecture 2.13. Our topic is, of course, nucleic acid. So this is the final of our 4 types of macromolecules. We had, of course, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and then here finally are nucleic acids. Now, the monomer of a nucleic acid is called the nucleotide. So we do have kind of a similar sound in both the monomer and the name of our molecules. The nucleotide structure consists of a 4-carbon sugar, so that's what I've drawn for you here, plus what's called a phosphate group. So remember our functional groups. This would be a phosphorus with oxygen surrounding. And then we need to have what's called a nitrogenous base. And we have 5 options for our nitrogenous bases. We have either adenine, thymine, uracil, cytosine, or guanine. And notice that each of these are often abbreviated with the first letter of the name. So you'll refer to these probably as A, T, U, C, and G. The most common examples of nucleic acids are the DNA and the RNA molecules, and these are going to be involved in our protein instructions. So very often these are described as our hereditary molecules. DNA is the molecule that's being passed from one generation to the next, whether we're talking about parents reproducing and forming offspring, or whether we're talking about a cell that is dividing and making another generation of cells. And then RNA, we will talk about more as we proceed through the semester and look at its role in giving those protein instructions. We also have a third nucleic acid molecule, which is called ATP. For non-majors biology students, this is discussed more in Chapter 5, but I did want to go ahead and include it as part of our discussion here. So you do want to make sure that you're looking at this information too. Our ATP molecule is going to be important because it is our energy molecule. So we've talked about carbohydrates and lipids being sources of energy. When we say it's a source of energy, that means we can break down carbohydrates and lipids in order to make ATP. So ATP is the energy molecule, jazz hands, it's exciting, whatever. Okay. Let's take a closer look at our DNA molecule. DNA stands for deoxyribose nucleic acid. So remember that as part of our nucleotide sequence, we need to have a 5-carbon sugar. The 5-carbon sugar that is involved in DNA is the sugar deoxyribose. So that's how we're getting the name here. Now, your DNA molecule is a double-stranded molecule, and you can sort of look at it like a ladder where the sides of the ladder are composed of the sugar and the phosphate group. And then the middle part of the ladder contains those nitrogenous bases. In the case of our DNA molecule, we will only see adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine as choices here. So there are just 4 possible nitrogenous bases for DNA. Now we will see that across, from one strand to the next, we have what's described as complementary base pairing, and there's a very set of rules here. So adenine always pairs with thymine for DNA. And so a good memory device that I learned from the lovely Amoeba sisters is that apples grow on trees. And so then we can see how that would fit in terms of our pairing up of our 2 strands. And so if apples grow on trees, meaning adenine pairs with thymine, then cytosine and guanine have to pair together. And again, from the lovely Amoeba sisters, we have this delightful memory device that the car is in the garage. So we can see how those would pair. Now, even though I drew it as a ladder initially to get us started, it is twisted. So it's a double helix, double-stranded helix. So the helix is that twist that we see on the molecule. So again, for DNA, we have our sugar is deoxyribose. It's a double-stranded molecule, and our bases are either adenine thymine or guanine cytosine. And there I said it backwards from how I wrote it. Your DNA molecule is always going to be located in the nucleus of the cell when we're talking about eukaryotic cells. So for general biology or non-majors biology, we're going to be focusing primarily on plant and animal cells as we move forward. And so those are both examples of eukaryotic cells. And so the DNA molecule would be housed in the nucleus. For A&P students, of course, we're studying the human, which only has eukaryotic cells. And so again, our DNA molecule is housed in our nucleus. The key job for your DNA molecule is really to give the cell directions for how to make those proteins. So it has the recipe for protein synthesis, making those proteins, the order of those amino acids. RNA, remember, is another one of our nucleic acids. And so here RNA is called RNA for the 5-carbon sugar, which is ribose. Now, RNA differs from our DNA molecule because it is single-stranded, but overall the structure is very similar. We still have a sugar phosphate backbone, and we still have nitrogenous bases. Here is an important difference. We will see uracil in RNA structure, not thymine. So for RNA, our possible bases are adenine, uracil, cytosine, and guanine. There are 3 different types of RNA that we'll be talking about this semester. We have what's called messenger RNA, transfer RNA, and ribosomal RNA. You always use capital letters to represent RNA, and then for messenger, you give it a lowercase m. Oops. For transfer, you give it a lowercase t, and for ribosomal, you give it a lowercase r. We'll be talking about the function of RNA in each of these 3 types in the future, so we will come back and discuss these more later on. What we need to know at this point is that the RNA molecule, all 3 types, are going to be involved in protein synthesis. And then I said our 3rd important type of nucleic acid is called ATP, which is the abbreviation for the molecule adenosine triphosphate. So the term adenosine is telling us the 5-carbon sugar and the nitrogenous base adenine. And instead of having a single phosphate attached, we actually will have 3 phosphate groups attached. So that's why it's called triphosphate. So you can see that it is a nucleic acid because we have a 5-carbon sugar, we have a nitrogenous base, and we have a phosphate group. Our adenosine triphosphate molecule, our ATP, is our energy molecule. So when we talk about breaking down carbohydrates and breaking down lipids in order to make energy, we are making ATP. This is what our cells use for energy. Any processes that require energy require ATP, okay? Energy is the ability or capacity to perform work. So lots of our chemical reactions will require ATP. Some of the mechanical processes in the cell will require ATP, will require energy. Remember, we're getting energy from the breakdown of glucose and the breakdown of fatty acids. We will get to talk about this process of how we actually make ATP in the future. So just stay tuned. Here, oops, trying to get my face out of the way. Here's our drawing of our ATP molecule. So you can see our nitrogenous base adenine, our 5-carbon sugar ribose. Remember, each one of these points represents a carbon. And then here we have our 3 phosphate groups. Now remember that our phosphate groups had a negative charge, and like charges repel. So we are like jamming together some negatively charged phosphate groups here. They don't really want to be jammed together. They're like, just in place, they're waiting to pop off. And so we can kind of represent these high energy bonds between phosphate groups as this little squiggly red line. This is that, repulsion between charges, this wanting to release from these bonds, from this molecule. So there's lots of what we call potential energy. Remember, potential energy is our stored energy. Now, when you hydrolyze ATP, remember hydrolyze is hydrolysis. Hydrolysis means the breaking of a water molecule in order to break apart another molecule. When you hydrolyze ATP, you end up with adenosine diphosphate, which we will abbreviate as ADP. You get one phosphate group popping off, and you get a whole bunch of energy given off. That's our kinetic energy, our energy that can perform work, right? Okay. And that is the end of chapter 3 for non-majors biology, and chapter 2, finally, right, guys, for A and P1.